Hey guys, Layla here, and today's video is a little different. I've reached 10K subs, so I figured I'd answer some of your questions as you watch me color one of my newest pieces with the Bianio Classic markers. So since there's quite a few questions, I'm just gonna dive right into it. Instagram user Mom's a Witch asks, where do you find inspiration? So I follow a lot of art Instagrams like Acier Barbie, Lunar Jokester, and Absoline, just to name a few of my favorite. And I also find inspo from like Insta models like Pasabist, or it might be Pasavist, I'm not sure, Do Fairy, and Zodidar. And they're just really pretty women that pretty much just give me inspiration for what kind of characters I want to draw. YouTube user XXOnlyYJXX asks, how do you get such long and perfect strokes on your line art? So I get this question a lot for both my traditional and digital art, and the easiest way to answer it is muscle memory. I've been drawing for so long that sometimes my long strokes are just repeated movements. So it's just definitely a practice makes perfect kind of idea to that. So just keep at it. Instagram user Murmur Draws, when did you start drawing? Or more like, when did you start taking your art seriously? So I started taking my art seriously in second grade. I know that sounds ridiculously early to take something seriously, but I say that because I distinctly remember thinking to myself, I want to get better because I really enjoy this and I want to do it for the rest of my life. And whenever anyone would ask me, that famous question of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always was like, I'm gonna be an artist. And I always received a bunch of mixed reactions the older I got with that question. So Instagram user Jerome Arts asks, how do you make your color selections? So when working with traditional art, I basically just eyeball it. I look at my color swatches and I'll start with one color. And then depending on what that one color is, I'll just build up the rest of my color scheme from that, and I'm always seeking out my complementary colors and then my supplementary colors and so on and so forth. And just having even a basic idea of color theory helps so much. So I highly encourage watching YouTube videos on color theory. YouTube user Chiggy No Life, what are your tips for hand proportions? Okay, the hand mitt. I know this sounds crazy, but those hand mitts or even those kitchen mitts where the entire four fingers are all together and then there's one little slot for the thumb on the side. Start drawing your hands like that to begin with. And then when you have that general pose, then start filling it in the details of each individual finger. And it helps so much with finger placement and all that stuff. I don't know. I'll do a tutorial on that soon. It's something that actually I saw on the internet. I can't remember from where, but it has helped me so much. YouTube user Neftali Albert, what made you come up with your YouTube channel name? So I'm obsessed with The Lion King, and in one of the songs from the musical, I believe, the word halalela is used, and I instantly fell in love with it, and it became my art name. That was back in 2011, I think. Insta user MH on Wheels, are you self-taught or did you go to art school? I'm mostly self-taught. I took a year of art in high school and a semester of art in college, but besides that, for the most part, I'm self-taught. YouTube user Lululemons asks, I need help starting digital art. Any tips? And how do you stay motivated? So first tip, don't spend a ton of money. There are so many great options out there for cheap digital tablets. Huon being one brand. There's also Parblo, which is another brand that's really affordable. Also start with free paint programs like Metabang and Krita. And as far as motivation goes, that's tough. I've always had motivation issues, and then one day I figured I needed to keep drawing even when I'm not motivated, because if we sit around waiting for motivation to strike, I'm gonna be sitting around waiting forever. So that's just not gonna work. YouTube user iGale Artsy, have you always been into art? Also, do you plan to make a comic or have a story in mind? Yes, I've always been into art. I honestly can't quite remember a time when I wasn't, and I absolutely have a comic and story in mind involving my original character, Devena. I just never have the time to really flesh it all out, and doing a comic is just a lot of work right now. But I do hope in the future to have my story made into something like a book or a comic or, I don't know, a movie. I have big dreams. Let's see where they end up. YouTube user Hannah Rusty Wilson, how did you decide to do YouTube videos and what is your favorite thing about doing YouTube? Do you have any advice for people who are debating on starting a channel? So I wanted to try a different platform with my art. I've been on DeviantArt before, I've been on Tumblr, Twitter, I'm currently on Instagram, and I just felt like I wanted to present myself and my art in a different way. My favorite thing about doing YouTube is definitely getting to make art, of course, but also helping people. As far as advice for people who are wanting to do a channel, I highly suggest studying other YouTubers that are doing what you want to do. I also highly recommend subbing to YouTubers who educate others on YouTube and how to build a YouTube channel. For instance, I love Roberto Blake and Brian G. Johnson, who are great when it comes to understanding YouTube and how to build a channel. I would definitely recommend looking them up and going over their advice. YouTube user Naturally Jizani, what did you use to learn human anatomy? Real life, and I also love studying from human anatomy books. They're really good. Mimi K asks, what will you be doing with your art career in 5 to 10 years from now? Going solo? Joining studios? That's a really interesting question. In 5 years' time, I hope to keep continuing with YouTube. And I mostly would be solo, I feel. I don't really have any ideas for long-term collaborations with others. I also plan on doing cons in the future. As far as 10 years in the future, wow. I would hope to have come out with my own fantasy book or comic by then. And hopefully still doing cons, but perhaps worldwide by then? I don't know. Those are my big dreams as of right now, though. Caitlin Does Arts asks, when and how did you first discover alcohol markers as an art medium, and what was your first ever brand of alcohol markers you used? So I discovered alcohol markers when I was in middle school, and it was the Prismacolor brand, but I never took it seriously then and gave up. And then just this last year, I started playing around with 2 or 3 different colored Copics that I bought, and I liked them, but I could never afford a full set back then. Not that I can really now, but I do have a set as of right now. And then I discovered cheaper alternative alcohol markers and completely fell in love. Delaney Maxwell asks, how long did it take for your art style to develop, and do you have any tips for perfecting it? So I feel like I'm about to give a weird answer to this, but basically I don't know. Art style, I feel, is super weird. I know I have an art style, but I've always felt it's never unique. So how long did it take to develop my style? I'm not sure. I still feel like I'm developing my style to this day. And as far as tips for perfecting it, I don't think art can ever be perfected. But if you're looking for getting better, I always try to look up to someone whose art I love and would hope to be like one day. My biggest art idol is Stanley Lau, commonly known as Artgerm. And I love everything he does and would hope to be as good as him one day, and I basically just study his work in order to get better. I don't want to completely be like him, but he does inspire a lot of my art style, I feel. Enrique Garcia asks, where do you keep all your markers? In my huge dresser that sits in my studio, and it's amazing, and thank goodness I have it because I have so many markers at this moment. Vela Noon asks, what is the worst habit you fell into with your art? And when did you realize you had that bad habit, and how did you get rid of it? So I fell into a habit of perfecting things before moving on. I used to obsess with starting to color the face on a character from beginning to end before moving on to the hair and the body. And it wasn't good because I was spending a lot of time on just one thing. So the drawing took way longer than it should have, and by the time I got to the hair or the body, I'd lose interest in the entire work altogether, which was just really bad when I needed to create finished pieces. When I realized it, I basically just had to consciously stop myself and just start working on the piece as a whole instead of just doing individual areas from start to finish. Jessica Collins asks, what do you do with pieces that you hate or are just blah about? Do you save them, try to fix them, or do you toss them to the curb? So when I was younger, I used to throw them away. And now I regret that because I love looking back on old work and seeing how far I've come. In the process, if I see that something is messed up, I may try to fix it then. But afterwards, once I'm finished with a piece, I don't ever usually go back and revisit it to try to fix it, unless I'm just redrawing it years later to see how much progress I've done. So I'll do that. But I think saving them is such a critical part of the artistic growth of artists, because it is so good to see your growth from 3, 4, 5 years ago to present day and being like, okay, wow, yeah, I've definitely grown as an artist. And I just think that's important. Tamsin M, what do you use as line art under your watercolor brush markers? Basically just water resistant liners, such as Copic multi-liners, which I used recently for my review of the Arteza Real Brush Pens video. Mona Hogan asks, best white gel pen? That's hard to say, as I've only ever used one brand, and that's the Sakura Jelly Roll gel pen in white. But I get tons of recommendations to try others, so that may change in the future, not sure. All right, and that's all the questions I have time for. I know there were so many more questions that I just didn't have time to cover. I promise to do another Q&A later on in the future, so maybe I'll answer everyone else's questions then. I don't know, we'll see. But if you enjoyed this video, maybe comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.